Hello and welcome. My name is Susan Allan, and I am so thrilled to be speaking to you today about Heartspace and the six-part conversation. The purpose of you learning something new, you probably have taken so many workshops and intensives and trainings as I have, but what's missing? I hope that you will find this as valuable as I have in filling the space between the cooperation and love and success you desire and that which you now will have. To be able to motivate and inspire anyone about anything is what is possible when you use this combination of skills, many of which I'm going to be covering today. And you can have your big dreams, and now you can motivate people so they become a reality. You can have your goals, and you will understand how to communicate with people, how to make requests, how to make offers, and how to be sure that at the end of the conversation, you have an agreement. All of these aspects of communication and generating cooperation are covered by this training. And we're doing a 4-hour training for you so that in this period of time, you can both understand the components, you can consider how this is going to be valuable for you in your own life, and also we've got some really fabulous role plays for you. Because in role plays, you can see how it works in real life. Because so many of us have wanted to learn new skills, and maybe you read a book about it or you watch a video about it, but you don't see how people can actually use it in a real day-by-day scenario. Would you agree? And so what we have for you is different role plays of different imaginary situations or real ones that are going to be very familiar with you. You're going to see yourself in them. You're going to see yourself in my 2 students who are both actors and who've volunteered to do these role plays with me. And so it's going to be fun, it's going to be informative, and it's going to give you the examples you want. Because what mentorship really is, and what training really is giving you a chance to see what works and model your own behaviors, adjust your own behaviors accordingly. Right? Because it's easy, very simple for any of us to tell you, this is what you need to do. But if you don't actually see it, then you wouldn't experience why it works. And if you don't really see it, you don't have that sense of, how can I do that? How can I copy that? So if you long for more peace, if you long for more love, if you long for more success, Heartspace and the 6-part conversation are those opportunities. So let's talk about the kind of relationships where Heartspace and the 6-part conversation really have a big impact. Well, I would say in every human scenario I've encountered, and also with people and their horses, people and their dogs, people and their cats, it is across the board. So whether you are a child, and the youngest person I've worked with is 4 years old, whether you're a teen, and I've worked with many, many teens, if you're a young adult, if you're a parent, if you're a newlywed, if you're retired, if you're elderly, I've worked with people from the age of 4 to 85, offering them Heartspace and the 6-part conversation for their lives, for the situations that are important to them, the situations that are important to you. So whatever it is that you're dealing with in your life, please understand that you have the power to manifest the life you wish from these simple skills. They're basic. And now you've got a video, so you'll be able to listen to the video again and again and again. And that's what you want to do. Many of my clients have asked for this video training with everything included. And so now here it is for you. So what is the most important part of getting along with people? The most important part is understanding who they are. I know who I am, But now if I'm talking to you, if I want to get along with you, it doesn't matter about me, it only matters about you. So as you'll see in the role play segments, when I am calming somebody down, whether it's someone who's, in the case of Lisa, pretending to be a very small child, or in the case of Mary Beth, pretending to be a woman who's lost her husband, or any of the other 20 or so role plays that we do for you, the key is, how does that other person think? What are those needs that he or she has? Well, we have to start by understanding our own needs, don't we? So that's why the training will begin by explaining to you the needs that we have, that all humans share. The only thing that's different between your needs and your partner's needs, your needs and your parents' needs, your needs and your children's needs are basically what's first, second, and third for you, maybe 10th, 11th, and 12th for them. And certainly as you grow up, a 4-year-old eventually becomes an 85-year-old. So that 4-year-old has very simple needs. And at 85, he or she has more complicated needs and different needs. So as you get older, as the people you care about get older, their needs change. But again, it's not so much that needs for physical safety are disappearing, they change. Financial security is something a child doesn't think of, but the need is still there, isn't it? A need for education, well, a child doesn't realize he or she has a need for education, so that's why our job when you are working with your child is to motivate them to find education exciting. And I was just talking with a 9-year-old client yesterday, and I was saying, I want you to think about reading, and I want you to think about fractions maybe in a new way for you. Like when you're driving in the car with your parents and they have to read a street sign so they know where they're going, or they read the GPS in the car so they know what turn to take. Yes, it's true now that GPS will talk to you, but sometimes you actually want to look at it and really see where the street is. So I said to her, imagine what would happen if your parents couldn't actually read the signs on the streets. What would happen? And she said, well, that would be scary. Yeah, exactly. And I said, and what would happen if you went to the grocery store with your mom or your dad and they needed to buy things to go home and cook, but they didn't understand fractions, so they didn't understand if they needed a cup of this or a half a cup or maybe a tablespoon or a teaspoon, because I found out that even though she's young, she cooks. So you need fractions if you want to learn to cook. You need to be able to read if you want to be able to be in your car traveling around. And the benefit of Heartspace and whole brain thinking and the 6-part conversation is that when you learn this, you will be able to generate great, cooperative, motivating agreements with anybody, with everybody, and about anything. And how does that sound? So let's start with whole brain thinking. And I'm going to have Mark, our director, put the model up so that you can take a quick look at it. And there you see the whole brain model. And this was created by Ned Herrmann of Herrmann International. Within this video training, you're going to see 2 different role play sets. One of them is with my really good friend and student, Lisa Cirincione. The other is with my really good friend and student, Mary Beth Pape. Now, each of them is a very talented actor. So I've given them the job of being the difficult, impossible, argumentative, carrying on, in-my-face person. And what I've done with the role play is given you a chance to see me using whole brain thinking and the 6-part conversation that you're learning today. Because when you have an idea of the way people think, and believe me, in these role plays, you'll see in just a few seconds, you get the picture. Is this someone who's very emotional? Well, in most cases of the role play, it is, because we just thought that would be more fun for you. Or is it somebody who's sad? Is it somebody who's concerned? Is it somebody who's got a practical problem? What exactly am I being faced with? And of course, I'm doing this so that each of you has an opportunity to see the practical application of these skills. When you have heart space skills, when you understand and have learned the six-part conversation, you can create peace with anyone about anything. You can also do something that's even more valuable, which is understand what the problem really is. You can't look to a solution with anybody until you have clarity, can you? So there are ways that you'll be seeing me finesse for information, find out exactly what's going on, connect with them in a deeper and deeper way. And also, to make this interesting, we've made these very short. Now, you know, in a real problem that you have with a family member, with a loved one, with a neighbor, with a boss, with a coworker, you might want to have a conversation that goes on for 15 minutes. Maybe it's one of a series of conversations. And so we've done this very abruptly so you can see how very, very quickly, when you really are listening for somebody's needs, they can get calm, they can become relaxed, and a solution is found. And in some of the role plays, you'll see we create a solution right there. And believe me, we did not know exactly what was going to happen before we sat in front of the camera. And you'll see, I mean, it's very fluid and it's very improv. And that's why it's so great that both of these women are terrific actors, because they know how to improv. In your life, you're going to have to learn a little bit about that too. Because truly, nobody gives you advanced warning when they're going to have an argument with you, do they? So with whole brain thinking, with the six-part conversation, you're going to be able to create peace with anybody about anything, no matter what. And the most important thing, you'll be able to create peace within yourself. Now we're going to speak about the most extraordinary part of understanding other people. There's a system that I've been studying for a very long time, and I'm certified in this. It's called whole brain thinking, and it is part of Herrmann International. And it's used by about 90% of the Fortune companies, which are the most successful companies in America. Now, they use it for a lot of different corporate reasons, but when I teach it to individuals and families, it's so that you have a fast track to understanding yourself and the way everybody that you care about thinks. Now, of course, feel free if you own a company, if you're middle management, if you're senior management, and if you're an employee brand new, right out of school, just getting your first job, please use it. Use these skills everywhere. But for our purposes today, I'm going to use it for those of us who are individuals and in families, and how to understand yourself, how to understand people you care about, how to generate more cooperation, and how to generate the results that are so important to you in your personal life. And when we understand the way we think, then that's the first step to understanding the way everybody else thinks. Because we're very similar. I mean, the irony is that chimpanzees are about 90% identical to humans. So when people tell me, well, you know, my husband's very different from me, or my daughter is very different from me, or my boss is very different from me, the truth is we think that they're different because their needs are different in terms of the order of priority. That's what you really mean. And when you have this deep understanding, I tell you, in 30 minutes, you listen to this, it's going to give you a chance to transform the way you interact with everybody about everything. Okay, so let's begin with the whole brain map. If you take a look at this map, you'll be able to understand that you've got 4 human thinking styles. You've got the blue quadrant, which is logical and analytical. You've got the green, which is thinking in a safe and organized and planned way. You've got the red quadrant, which is all about feelings and connection with other people. And you've got the visionary yellow quadrant, which is all about making a difference in the world and being able to have an outside-the-box view or an overview. Thank you. So when you take a look at the way you think, I want you to imagine that you've got 4 pairs of sunglasses. Have you ever worn those sunglasses that are for fog or night vision, which have yellow lenses? Well, that's the visionary brain. That's you. You may be a meditator. You may enjoy yoga. You may want peace. You may love nature. Now, loving nature may mean you're a surfer. It may mean that you're a landscape architect. It could go either way. But that's the visionary personality. The way of thinking means that you actually have more brain development in that part of your brain. This is real. It's based on the Sperry brain model. So even though it's exaggerated into 4 different equal quadrants and we've got pretty colors and all that, think about it like a car with 4 tires. The car has 4 tires, and if you want the car to drive at high speeds and you want to have a successful trip, you've got to have all 4 wheels on the ground, right? And we know that sometimes when the terrain is unsteady, we want something called 4-wheel drive. I went to Africa. We were in the Serengeti, and they had activated 4-wheel drive. So this is what we're talking about. You need to be able to use your whole brain as much as you possibly can in order to be able to handle situations that are stressful or even dangerous. And this is the first skill that will do it. And a little bit later, we'll be talking about the 6-part conversation, which is another completely different set of skills that allows you to understand how to communicate with people, generate cooperation, and solve problems. Because that's what this is all about in life. We need to be problem solvers, don't we? We need solutions. Life is wonderful if it's a great, daring adventure, as Helen Keller said, but life is not so great if it's a great, daring adventure and you don't land on your feet. Then it's not fun at all. So let's look at these 4 quadrants. So we talked about having a yellow pair of sunglasses, the visionary brain. Now, have you ever heard about rose-colored glasses? Of course. So that's the feelings brain, the lower right brain, where you're connecting to other people, you're imagining what they feel, and it's easier for you to be empathetic. It's easier for you to be emotional. Maybe you're an actor, maybe you're a singer, maybe you're a dancer, maybe you're a writer, maybe you're an author, maybe you're a speaker. So you know where I fall, right? Because I've been talking a lot, and you've been listening a lot. So to be able to speak on and on and on and on, that's someone who's very right-brained, lower right-brained. Now imagine you have green sunglasses. You know, we used to wear green sunglasses. If you look at pictures of the 50s, then you'd see, Marilyn Monroe wearing green sunglasses. So if you look through at the world through these green lenses, if you look at what is on the list, it's about safety, it's about order, it's about doing things in a consistent, organized way, it's about planning for the future. Now, planning for the future is different from having enough money for the future, let's say. Planning for the future is different from having all the friends you need in the future. Planning for the future means you're organized and you've got your to-do lists and you're figuring out everything before you have to do it, and you know where you're going, and somehow you're going to insist that you get there, right? You're not sure about all the skills and tools you need, but if you're a planner, you're going to figure this out in advance. So think about a time when you were going on a fabulous vacation, the most exciting vacation you ever had. So you had to plan because you wanted to get every minute of every day to be the most fantastic vacation, right? So maybe you were going to some exotic place. So you had to figure out the weather. You had to figure out safety precautions. Maybe it was a place like India where I lived. I've been to India 57 times, so I was always looking at how was I going to make my time in India more satisfying as well as more safe, as more, exciting, thrilling, magnificent. Planning and organization. People who are going to take sewing kits with them in case they're not going to go to a 5-star hotel where you can get one. So that kind of behavior is planned. And as you understand, we talked about the visionary person. We've talked briefly now about the emotional person, the connecting person. Now we've talked briefly about the organized and orderly person. The fourth is the blue sunglass, where you look at the world through sunglasses and you see money, numbers, dollars, facts, data, and you have an ability to intend, very seriously intend the kind of results you're going to get. So for the upper left, the blue sunglass concept, think about Donald Trump and Martha Stewart. If you think about them together and compare them to each other, there's a similarity. They take no prisoners, they're absolutely serious, they want to get it done. Now, as you understand the 4 different types as I've talked about it, you know that the way you talk to Donald Trump or Martha Stewart, upper left brain, blue quadrant, serious, business, getting it done people, that's totally different from the way you would think about a conversation with a singer or an actor like Marilyn Monroe, right? So that's very emotional, very connecting, really empathizing, being in your heart. This is where Heartspace comes in. Being in your heart, being connected to that other person from your heart to hers, from your heart to theirs. And listening with your heart. And you're in your heart space when they're speaking to you as well. So that's completely different. Now, the reason you have to understand these 4 different ways of thinking is because I want you to understand that the way they listen to you, the way they respond to you, and the way you respond to them, it's not right or wrong. It's different. It's not good or bad. It's different. And the sooner that you learn these basic 4 skills in this Herrmann model, plus the 6 basic skills of the 6-part conversation, the sooner you get all that, the sooner you're able to choose the words you need to motivate and inspire anybody. So now let's take a look at how you would use an understanding of these 4 different types with basic conversational skills, basic communication skills that you already have. So if you're talking to Donald Trump, Martha Stewart, or a traffic cop, let's imagine you were just stopped for speeding. Now, you're going to be asked for your license and registration, right? So this is not a time to give excuses. This is a time to hand the officer your license and registration, because their thinking is just the facts, nothing but the facts. You may have a parent like this. You may have had teachers like this. You may have a boss like this. You may have somebody who manages you in your job like this, or you may be like this. If this is the way someone thinks, they want the facts, they don't want anything but the facts. Can you see that? Okay. Now, the next quadrant, how to communicate with somebody who's in that green quadrant, somebody who wants safety and order and preparedness. So we're thinking Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts here, right? Always be prepared. So if you are a Girl Scout and you're talking to the Scout leader and you want to get badges, it's about getting it done on time. If you're talking to your teacher or your professor and you have something that's due, some assignment that's due, even if you're going for a doctorate, it doesn't matter. Even if you're in medical school, even if you're in your law school, it doesn't matter who the teacher or the professor is. It's a question of doing what you need to do at a certain quality within a certain time frame. That's the key. And you need to be able to communicate with those people in just such a way, using time, which is numbers, but in this case it's time, it's deadlines, it's what you're going to do by when, how you're going to get it to them, how are you going to do it for them, etc. So you jump into the conversation they want to have. You don't try to have the conversation with them that you want to have. Why? Because you'll never generate cooperation. Because the teacher or the professor has power in your life. You start by communicating with them. Now, when I'm teaching you the 6-part conversation in a little while, then I'll show you how you can motivate people a little bit more or a little bit less. But right now, the key is understanding who your listener is. Okay? Now, the 3rd part is this romantic, emotional, passionate, connecting person. With that person, again, you dive into your heart space, you're in your heart, you connect to them in their heart, you make sure that they really are heard, but in a feeling vocabulary. The vocabulary is completely different in each of these 4 quadrants, isn't it? Because people see you differently. So you're talking, it's very funny. In fact, I had someone who used to tease me because all the superlatives I would use in my conversation. Susan, everything's fabulous. Susan, everything's the greatest. Susan, everything's incredible. Susan, everything's wonderful. Susan, is everything always that way? Is anything, Susan, ever just fine? So that's someone who is triggered by hearing me be so lower right brain, so in my emotional responsiveness, right? That's someone who is very left brain. Now, depending on the way that person was criticizing or critiquing or complaining or any word you want to throw at it, I would be able to tell in a very short period of time where he or she was coming from. So I remember who it was. And it was someone who was exceedingly upper left brain, a brilliant, brilliant guy who had practiced as an attorney for 17 years, had never been defeated in court. Can you imagine how smart that guy must be? Never defeated in court in 17 years. Very practical, very factual. I just want the facts. No different from a traffic cop stopping you for speeding. How fast were you going? What was the speed limit in this zone, right? And you've got to be able to understand their needs. And so when we talk about the 6-part conversation, understanding that kind of thinking and what that means when somebody responds to you that way gives you this incredible benefit. Because if you don't let yourself freak out, if you don't let yourself get angry, if you don't respond and react, you can very quickly figure out, how can I calm that person down? How can I make the moment lighter? Because ultimately we want peace, don't we? We want cooperation, and this is the way to get it. Okay, now the final quadrant is somebody who is thinking like a visionary. Someone who is thinking in a very, very peaceful way. Maybe this is someone who's a long-time meditator. By the way, taking certain drugs falls into that quadrant as well. So if someone is smoking a lot of grass and they're really zoned out, that can be the upper right brain person too. Maybe they're doing yoga, so they're really in the zone. And so you want to understand their needs. They have a need for peace. They have a need for ease. And I'm even speaking slower. Do you see that? Naturally now, I know that when I'm going to speak to someone who comes from that quadrant, I have to speak slowly and I have to really be peaceful. Because that's someone who values peace above all, right? Does that make sense? When someone values peace above all, your number one opportunity is to give them peace above all if you want to motivate them to cooperate. Now, I'm not saying you cave. This is what you do for your own reasons. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it because you want to generate more cooperation from that other person, right? Okay, now we're going to start to talk about thinking. Because there's no way for you to use the best communication skill in the world, the 6-part conversation, unless you really have the ability to think. Because in the 6-part conversation, you're going to end up at solution. And you need to be able to really think clearly in order to get to solution, don't you? So now we're going to talk about what I call the backwards Z. And this is a system that I've come up with using this whole brain map and using it in a slightly different way. So if we take a look at the backwards Z map now, then we can see that in the backwards Z, step 1 is in the right quadrant, because this system is for right-brained people. And many of us are more right-brained than left-brained. And by the way, it is not Venus and Mars, because there are some people who are more upper-brained and more lower-brained. And that is all the difference in the world, because if you're trying to figure out what someone's needs are, if you're trying to motivate them or generate cooperation with them, then you need a system that really represents people, not represents some people, don't you? Okay, so the backwards Z. You're starting in the visionary brain because you are a visionary. If you're not a visionary, then wait till we get to the next system, and then you don't have to pay much attention to this, except one day you're going to meet people who are visionaries and you want to know how to talk to them, right? You want to know how they think. You want to learn how everybody thinks so that you can create the greatest amount of cooperation possible. So I went to a TV meeting a long time ago, and I wasn't sure who I was going to meet with, and I didn't know who I was going to pitch, so I figured I better be prepared. So I did 4 versions of my pitch. So if you're someone who goes to meetings of any kind, even if it's a family meeting, you want to be able to craft your pitch, because it's always about a pitch, isn't it? You want to craft your pitch so that the person listening feels heard, feels understood, and therefore is motivating. So let's look at the backwards Z. This is the way creative people think. You start in the visionary brain, you've got an idea. So let's say you've got an idea to go on a vacation with your family. You've got an idea, like going to the Epcot Center in Orlando, just because I'm going there in January, and I'm going to meet my stepfather and his current wife, and we're going to have a family vacation. So I had this idea, because I'm going to be in Orlando for a meeting, and I called them up and I said, here's my idea. And I told them, Orlando, Epcot. And I immediately started to talk about how fun it would be for them. I'm already convinced, I'm already sold, right? Fun for them. And they were getting excited. Then I shifted into the facts and figures, upper left. That's all the facts. Just the facts, ma'am, just like a traffic cop. So I gave them information. What's the information I had? Well, I had the dates. I had how long I could stay. I had some thoughts about the specifics of the information and just the information. Then I connected to feelings. Their feelings, my feelings, anybody's feelings. It would be so much fun. It would be so much, exciting. This is one of the rides that I think my stepfather would love. This is one of the rides that I think his wife would love. This is what I think would be fun. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? But I didn't say those words. You'll find out a little bit later the actual words I used, but basically I'm connecting to their feelings. And just to let you know what it is, I don't want you to feel there's any suspense here. It's, I imagine that you would really be excited about going to the such and such because I know that XYZ is a hobby of yours. And I'm guessing you might really have fun at the ABC because 1, 2, 3 is your hobby. And I know how much you love that. How does that sound? So that's how we connect to someone else's feeling and needs very quickly using a skill you'll be learning called empathy. Now, we've done 3 quadrants. Now, the final is the lower left, preparing, organizing, and planning, right? Well, that's easy. So I suggested the dates that would be most convenient. We agreed on those dates, which would be convenient for them. We talked about how many days I'd be at my meetings in Orlando, when I would see them, when I would stay with them, and when we would go to Epcot, and when I'd leave to come back to California. Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a list, and let's talk about it again on such and such a day. So we've got a plan. Now, I don't want you to think that we've got a plan and everything's fine. Obviously, I didn't buy any tickets yet. I didn't deal with the hotel reservations yet. We haven't finalized that, but we've had a conversation in which we've agreed that we have a plan for the future. And please understand that a plan is completely different from an agreement, which we'll be getting into when I talk about the 6-part conversation. A plan is a conversation about an agreement, but the agreement is when we know I'm taking United Airlines, flight number such and such, it leaves Los Angeles, it arrives in Orlando, I'll be doing this, 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 then I'll see them on such a day at such a time. That's an agreement. As soon as they say, perfect, we are on course, we're going to do that, we'll see you at the airport. Until that's happened, you don't have an agreement, right? And because the agreement's coming, it's in January, obviously, if this is important to you, you confirm with people all along the way. That's just common sense. So now let's look at the backwards C. The backwards C is a way of absolutely thinking for people who are more practical, more rational, and more organized. They're not visionaries. They don't start with the idea. They start with the goal. So if we look at the backwards C, then we start in the blue quadrant, the upper left, facts, figures, dollars, numbers. So then I'm going to use the same example. If I were a different person, I would know that I have an opportunity to be in Orlando, January, date such and such. And the facts are that my stepfather and his wife live a town over. Those are just the facts. So if I were a fact-thinking person, if that's the way my brain were wired, and remember, this is real, Sperry brain model, this is really the way people have different brains, they get to the same conclusion different ways. So it would have immediately, in my computer, it would have said Orlando, Orlando, bing, 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 right? Would have said Sydney and Joan, bing, bing, bing. But I'm telling you the truth, that's not the way I came there at all. I came from an idea and a concept. But now here you are, you're in your backwards C thinking, you've got the facts, now you have to force yourself to think about an idea. And when I work with people who are bankers, who are attorneys, who are accountants, CFOs, senior sales management, stockbrokers, these kind of thinkers start with the facts, just like the traffic policeman who's just the facts man. So you got the facts, now you have to force yourself, train yourself, or be coached by me to go over into this upper right brain where the concept, the idea, the big picture may live. How are you going to combine the facts about Orlando and your family with an idea? Well, you have to reach outside the box. So you reach outside the box by looking, and it may be very difficult if this is new for you. It may be a whole new thing. Now let's look at, for just a moment, let's look at someone who has a health crisis. If somebody has a health crisis, they may know the facts, and I've worked with countless clients who have had health crises that they have resolved successfully. You know, they've lived, they've gone into remission, they're cured, all of the above. And we always do it by backwards C or backwards Z thinking. If your doctor is giving you information and the doctor's calling it a diagnosis and the doctor is recommending certain strategies or additional doctors, those are all about facts. You need to understand any symptoms, you need to get tests, you need to get test results. Once you have that, you also want to look at other solutions that other people have had that have improved the odds. If it's a serious illness, it's about improving the odds, isn't it? There's no guarantee for some of these things. So you want to be able to do anything and everything you can to get as close to perfect health as fast as is humanly possible. That make sense? Now, if we go back to the example of the trip to Orlando, we've got the facts, we've got the outside-the-box idea. Well, she's going to Orlando, that's me, and my family lives in the next town over, so gosh, here's an idea. Let's see if we can make this work in some way. Then you force yourself into the feelings of other people, because if you're a very practical person, you're going to be tempted to go from the upper left facts to the lower left plan without even thinking about the other people involved. And I can't even imagine how many people I have spoken to who have been my clients, who were very left brain, very practical people, and who were stunned and thrilled when I explained to them that the breakdown in the plan was not where they were going with their family. That was not the breakdown in most cases. But they didn't give their family a chance to express their own responses. So here's how it would look if I did. So I would call my stepfather and Sid and Joan. You know them already, right? So I would call Sid and Joan, and I would say, if I'm a practical, factual person, I'm going to be in Orlando such and such date in January. I had this idea that we might be able to get together. Now notice I'm speaking differently. I'm more practical and factual. I'm not flowery, I'm not emotional, I'm not creative, right? Because I have a different brain and I'm just demoing that for you. So it seemed to me it might be a good opportunity for us to get together. Now I would be forcing myself to say, because this is new for me if I'm left-brained, I would say, and I'm hopeful that that might be enjoyable for you too. See, I'm more formal because lower right brain people are much more connecting, naturally warmer, naturally more affectionate. We may touch you, we may tap you, we may hug you, all that stuff, right? But this is, we're showing the other side of the coin. And then hopefully Sid and Joan would say, yeah, let's check our schedule, give me a minute, give me a day, whatever it is. And then they'd let me know, yeah, this is great. I mean, this is wonderful, terrific. And then we'd go to the lower left part where we make our plan. And making your plan is not very different. Making your plan is still going to be the very last thing you do. Checking in with the other people and checking in with your own feelings is still going to be the second to the last thing that you do. And if you look at backwards Z, if you look at that map for a moment, you'll see that you begin in the top, you begin in the upper right, then you go to the upper left, then you go to the lower right, then you go to the lower left, but the bottom doesn't change. Now we're going to show you the backwards C, and you're going to see that the bottom half is the same. It's identical. And that's really going to be interesting for you because this is two completely different ways of thinking. But look at this map now. You doing something different with the upper part of your brain, different order, reverse order, but in the bottom part of your brain, you're doing exactly the same thing as you did before. Because why? A plan obviously has to have a plan. So you have to check in with other people before you make a plan. Now, why don't you check in with other people first, for example? Well, a lot of people, tragically, do check in with their own feelings first before they make a plan. Now, checking in with your own feelings is something we're going to cover in the 6-part conversation. You need to check in with your feelings and bring yourself back to peace, calm yourself down before you connect with somebody else, before you motivate and inspire somebody else. But checking in with your own feelings is not going to help you at all if you haven't first considered the facts and the big picture. Because the facts and the big picture, that is something real. That is something that you must consider. That's where the magic lies, in coming up with a solution. Yeah, it's true that you've got to check in with other people and you've got to motivate them. You've got to make sure the plan includes their needs. And yes, of course, you have to be able to get it done. That's what the green quadrant is about. But where the genius of the solution comes from is the upper brain. And I want to let you know, since every communication you're ever going to have with anybody about anything, got to have facts, got to have outside-the-box options. This is the way to do it. And Herrmann Brain Dominance, which is what this system is all about, and developed by Herrmann International decades ago, so that 90% of the Fortune companies could really hire the people they wanted to hire, train and manage the people they hired, decide who they want to fire, and decide who they want to promote, and get those people to the next level. This is crucial. This is the way that you really begin to operate and see how you can have relationships with people that are easy, peaceful, satisfying, cooperative. Why? Because understanding this gives you the ability to understand how they're thinking. How do they see it? I mean, I can't expect to shove something at somebody and have them go yum, yum, yum. I can't expect to deliver the same thing to every one of you in the same way and have you enjoy it and accept it. Can I? No, of course not. So now we're going to talk about what makes people different and how you can tell. Because again, this is a training, Heartspace and the 6-part conversation, which is about how to generate cooperation from anyone about anything. And again, we're talking about motivating and inspiring people. We are not talking about forcing them, because it doesn't work. If it worked for me to force you, wouldn't I do it? Of course. If it worked for you to force me, you would be doing that all day long. But we've tried it. Many of us tried it when we were younger, and we tried it and tried it and tried it and tried it, and we found it was so disappointing. The results just weren't what we expected. So now we need these better skills, right? Okay, so now let's talk about, I'm going to talk about famous people because you know them and I know them. We may not have known them personally. We may not have been their best friends, but you know who I mean. If I give you an example about clients of mine or friends of mine, it's not going to be as interesting to you, I would guess. If I talk about Marilyn Monroe, Mahatma Gandhi, these are people you know who I'm talking about. If I talk about Bill Clinton, if I talk about Hillary Clinton, if I talk about people who are political figures, historical figures, we could talk about what is most likely their Herrmann Brain Dominance profile, because every one of us has a slightly different profile. And I want you to understand that if I had brought like 40, 50, 100 profiles, I could put them up on the screen. You'd probably feel a little dizzy by now, but you'd see that some of us are more lower right-brained. Some of us are more upper right-brained. Some of us are more upper left-brained. Some of us are more lower left-brained. And what's really interesting is only about 1% of the total human population is equidominant, which means a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, and they all kind of balance out. And in corporate America, it's about 6% of the population there who are equidominant. But remember, the people who are working at a corporation are people who've already been pre-selected for the highest level of functionality. even if it's someone who's a design director, as I was in the fashion industry for 20 odd years, as a design director, I still had to be able to get along with clients, potential clients, lower right brain. I still had to think about what the fabrics were going to cost. I had to think about where they were going to be made and what I was going to have to pay the factory for each garment. So that's upper left. And I still, more than anything, had to figure out how to get it done, and that's how I became an efficiency expert, because here I was in third world countries like India trying to get factories turned around, transformed quickly, and get everything done in a very, very different way so that the customers and the stores back in America would be happy. So even if your title is creative director, can you see that in order to be successful in the bigger picture called a corporation, you've got to be more whole brain. Now, interesting is when you look at this map, a family needs whole brain function. So imagine that you're the mother or the father, and you are very right-brained, which is fine. And imagine that your partner is very right-brained, which is fine. You're going to get along fantastically at home if you're peaceful people. You have to be right-brained, and that lower right, that red quadrant, can't be like a bull and a red cape. So you have to be able to have your emotional state be pretty peaceful, pretty calm. But let's imagine you do. So everything at home is beautiful, but where are you going to have a problem the minute you open the front door? Or the minute the mail comes and there are bills, if one of you isn't also very good about data, dollars, facts, figures, and getting it done. Now, the opposite is true if you're very, very different. You can have the most fabulous relationship if you're very different. Now, you've heard opposites attract. And Ned Herrmann, who's the creator of this Herrmann Brain Dominance instrument, has said that, yeah, there's nothing more magical, magnificent in a relationship between two opposites if they respect and appreciate the differences. And of course, easy for someone else to say, right? If you're at home and you've got that partner who's so different from you, it makes you want to rip out your hair, I want you to pay attention to the fact that is one of you functioning in a way that both of you cannot? Is one of you creating peace? That's the yellow person. Is one of you taking care of bringing in money? That's the blue. Is one of you very affectionate and passionate? That's the red. Is one of you very organized and keeping both of you and the whole family on a safe track for the future? That's the green. Now, for those of us who prefer to be without a live-in partner, we've got to understand that that's our job, to do the whole thing by ourselves. So think about it. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. Now you've got to function in all these different ways yourself. So this might be a perfect time for you to turn to your partner and give that partner an enormous hug and a lot of kisses, because now you see that this partner is helping you ignore some things that you're not good at, that you don't know how to do, right? So it's very, very key to understand the difference that's either in your home with you and your partner and your family members, so everything gets done, or the similarities between you two and your family members, so that you've got problems that have to be solved, and somebody's got to pick up the slack. So somebody's got to be functional in earning money, somebody's got to be functional in paying the bills on time, somebody's got to be functional about a safety exit plan in case there's a national disaster, earthquake, fire, whatever. Somebody's got to be warm and connecting and loving, particularly if there are young children and pets. And somebody's got to be really peaceful and really able to let it just roll off her back or his back, because it's not worth picking a fight, right? Now, let's talk about it when it's just you. So when it's just you, this is a very, very, very important part of it. When it's just you, You've got to be able to handle everything that comes up. And before it comes up is when you want to handle it, right? You don't want to have enough money when you need it, because I've listened to a lot of clients talk about that. No, you don't want enough money when you need it. You need enough money before you need it. Nobody wants to go through that kind of torture. Nobody wants to go through that kind of stress. At the same time, some people need $50 million for a business that's a huge project. Some people need $10,000 for a business that's a small project. There's no right or wrong. It's based on the way your brain is wired. If you start to realize that every thought you have, every word you say, every person you have a great relationship with, every person you have a rotten relationship with, it all comes back to the way you see the world. Which pair of sunglasses is most like you? Which do you wear most of the time? And how willing are you to really learn this and have freedom and have ease and have cooperation and have peace with everybody? So no matter what way you think, I will not fight with you because I don't like to fight. No matter what way you speak, you're not going to get a fight out of me. You're not going to get a fight out of any of the people who are my clients who have acquired these skills to a level of excellence or mastery. Because when you're starting, when you're a novice at a skill set, it's really hard to be an expert at it in the moment, right? Expertise in the moment requires a lot of preparation. And when you're a novice in something, you need a lot of time to relax. Imagine you're playing golf. Now you want to hit your tee shot. You don't want anybody to rush you. You want to get your stance. You want to have your hand. You want to have the grip. You want to have everything right. How's the wind going? What about the sun in my eyes? You need your time. Same thing is true if you're one of my clients who's in school. She reads. She enjoys reading, but now she has reading tests. The reading test, she's got to have comprehension based on vocabulary, based on pronunciation of the words, based on all this. It's complicated. Do you remember when you were learning how to read? It's complicated. Do you remember when you were learning how to drive? Maybe you started by driving the Walmart or the Kmart parking lot or some huge parking lot on the weekends or at night when there was nobody there. Maybe you said to yourself, well, this is easy. I don't know why I have to take driver's ed. This is really simple. Because you weren't thinking about driving down the freeway at 75 miles an hour or in Germany on the Autobahn at 110, right? You just weren't thinking about it. These skills, like any skills, are going to require that we begin as a novice and we relax and cut ourselves some slack. We move to an intermediate level of skills, then we move to excellence, then we move to mastery. And there's no push, because this is your life. There's no rush. You have the rest of your life to have better and better relationships. I just want to make sure that you now have these skills available to you. You have me available to you. And that you're able to understand that the more you think this way about what is that person's brain preference? What is their thinking preference? What part of the brain is lighting up? It's like 4 rooms in a house, isn't it? So if you're in the living room and somebody's looking from the street, they're going to see that in the living room the lights are on. Maybe you then go into the bedroom and suddenly the bedroom lights are on. Then you're going to cook dinner and you go into the kitchen and the kitchen lights are on. And maybe you turn the lights out and don't get sidetracked with that. But the bottom line is this is like rooms in your house. This is different skills, different abilities where you do different things. And you need to be able to do all of those things in order to have the most satisfying life, right? So you want to be able to get along with everybody. You don't want to look at a job description and you've got the education for it, you've got the training for it, you've got the experience for it, and you don't want to think that you're afraid to go on the interview because this is a big company and they probably are going to be difficult. You want to be able to say to yourself, no, 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 no. How difficult could it be? I understand wherever this person is going to be coming from, I'll be able to jump into the program. Okay, so let's look at just a couple of characters in history so you really understand this. How do you figure out the way that people are thinking? Because this is about real thinking, and thinking requires your whole brain. It doesn't require that you use 100% of your brain, because let's face it, humans don't do that yet. But it requires that you have the ability to consider things from all four perspectives. This is a three-dimensional sculpture that you're making. It's not just a face that you're carving and flat on the back. It's not just part of a bust of somebody. It's the whole thing, okay? So we talked about, briefly, Marilyn Monroe. So Marilyn Monroe was almost exclusively a lower right brain feeling person. Everything we know about her tells us that. She was very, very emotional. She was, in fact, too emotional for her own sense of peace. We know that she married a number of times, so we know that, again, she was very connecting. Certainly, we would say she was one of the most passionate people that has ever hit the silver screen, and we remember her today because of that. She was so sexy. That's how we see that passionate nature, that lower right brain nature. So Marilyn Monroe, to me, is the quintessential example of passion, and that's the lower right brain. Now, interestingly, a lot of the celebrities and movie stars that we adore in America and around the world fit into that quadrant. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn looked very different from Marilyn, totally different body type, wasn't overtly sexual, but was sweet and loving and gentle and connecting. So some of us love both of them. Some people resonate with one or the other. But you see that they're both very sensitive, very emotional people. And I'm a vintage movie expert, so I could go on and on for 25 hours just about the different movies they've done and what the proof is of where they showed their passionate, connecting nature. So if you've seen any of their movies, you'll see that too. Not only women, of course. Marlon Brando, Warren Beatty on screen. Now, Warren Beatty has another personality as a producer and as a director, but on screen, Warren Beatty, most of his roles. Shampoo, where he plays, the hairdresser who's actually taken from a real-life person who I know. So that character, all about feeling, emotion, passion, sex, connecting with other people. We've talked about the upper left brain. That's Donald Trump and Martha Stewart. You're never going to get a better example of what that upper left brain is than those two individuals who are all about success. They're driven. That's the upper left. They could be successful without being so driven if they activated their upper right visionary brain a little bit. They could be more successful if they activated their empathy for other people, lower right brain, a little bit. We have the ability to transform ourselves by generating more whole brain function. That's another part of this training. You want to know this, that for the rest of your life, you are building your brain in exactly the way you want it to be, or sadly, it's unbuilding itself as we age. Now, what about the visionary brain? Well, Apple computers are the classic example. Think different, right? Think different is the upper right brain person. Every guru, the Buddha, every spiritual master, Jesus, everyone who was connecting to the divine. This is different from religion. I say Jesus because Jesus was not the founder of a religion in his lifetime. He was the founder of a religion after his lifetime. But as the spiritual being that he was, living in connection with the divine, living in harmony with nature. The Buddha, being in nature, looking for enlightenment, discovering the middle way. This is the ultimate example of the upper right brain. When the Dalai Lama teaches, the Dalai Lama usually is teaching from that part of himself, the visionary leader, the spiritual master. Now, let's talk about the final quadrant. That is the lower left. That is the bookkeeper. That is the personal assistant. That is the mom who has 5 children and has to keep everybody clean and safe. The lower left brain is just about getting it done. Functionality. How do you wake up in the morning and start functioning? How do you function all day no matter what? How do you get it done? That, in fact, is why nurses have not been given the respect that they often have needed. And I say this because my father was a surgeon and he was beloved by his nurses, which was unusual, because he appreciated that they were doing what he wasn't doing. They were doing what he couldn't do at the same time he was doing surgery, or the same time he was doing after-surgical care. It's not about good or bad or right or wrong, as I've said. It's about different. Different functionality, plus different functionality, plus different functionality, plus different functionality, and you have the whole function you need in life. And that is what this tool, Herrmann Brain Dominance, will give you every single time. You'll be able to have an understanding of people you're meeting for the first time. You'll be able to have an understanding of family members you've known since you were born. You'll be able to make better choices about new partners, by the way. You'll be able to see people with a lot more clarity. People will not be able to fool you because you'll get it. You'll get that if they sound like Donald Trump and Martha Stewart, that's the part of the brain that's most active. And if you're looking for someone who is the quintessential lover, that probably isn't the person. Or if you want somebody to meditate with and go to ashrams with, that's not the person. It might be the person to get things done, but I've got to tell you, wealthy and generous do not occupy the same quadrant, so be careful. Caring for the sick isn't identical to keeping himself or herself well. So wellness and caretaking is a completely different thing as well. So as you see this more and more, you'll be able to understand the way other people think, and then you'll be able to craft the conversation, the 6-part conversation that I'm going to be teaching you in just a minute or two. You'll be able to see exactly how to create the proper conversation with the perfect way of speaking, different vocabulary, different connection, different emotional state. And as you'll see in all the role plays that you're going to see in this training, you'll see that there's a slightly different shift. In any role play, it's about calming somebody down. So you've got to calm them down. But you're going to calm them down in a slightly different way. And you're going to see different role plays that I do with different people. There's a slightly different energy because that person is expressing himself or herself in a different way. So this is evolutionary for each of us. As we practice this, we get better at it. As we practice it, we see things that we didn't see before. As we practice it, people respond more quickly because we're just better at it. Now, I will tell you that it's complicated. So don't believe that you've got it 100%. Approach this as a new tool that you're going to experiment with. Look at the brain map, print out the brain map, put it on your refrigerator, put it on your bathroom mirror. Look at that brain map a couple of times a day. And as you do that, you're going to be going out into the world and you're going to be speaking to people in a different way. You're going to be really listening to them, which is step number one, hearing what they say. You can get a lot of clues from the way people dress as well. I mean, if you see somebody wearing tie-dye, it's not a coincidence that that person probably is the upper right brain. If you see somebody wearing a navy blazer, that person is almost definitely going to be an upper left brain person. If you see somebody who is wearing, a woman who's wearing a low-cut sweetheart neckline, a sweetheart neckline equals lower right brain person. And if you see somebody who's, wearing a blue shirt and khaki pants and, that's someone who's getting things done, functional, but not the boss, not the wealthiest person in the room, but highly functional. And that's the lower left brain person. And every time you think back to the whole brain model, you will be that much more successful and effective in motivating and inspiring people. And the more that you get into your heart space, the more that you understand the six-part conversation and use that, you'll be able to find that every single relationship that you have gets better and better and better. People will appreciate you more and more. You will have better, faster solutions. And truly, this will be an amazing new way to live, where there are no problem people, and no one will ever consider you to be a problem person either. It's going to be peaceful, it's going to be joyous, it's going to be cooperative, and it's going to be you living in your heart space, thinking and listening and speaking and acting.